There was a time when you waited. You waited for the message, for the apology, for someone to notice, for something to finally feel different. Now you don't. Now your phone can stay silent for hours and you barely react. Plans fall through and you shrug. People promise things and you don't believe them. You don't get angry. You don't get hopeful. You just don't expect. And on the surface, it looks like peace. No disappointment, no anxiety, no long nights replaying conversations in your head. You tell yourself you've grown. You've matured. You've stopped being naive. But somewhere, quietly, something else has happened. You didn't just lower your expectations. You stopped believing. Not only in others, but in outcomes, in connection, in being chosen. And that shift didn't come from nowhere. It came from repetition. When you expect something good and it doesn't come, your nervous system feels the drop. It's not just emotional, it's physical. Hope rises, your body opens, your mind builds a small future. Then reality collapses it. Do that enough times and your system adapts. It learns. It protects you. So instead of rising and falling, you stay flat. Flat feels safer. This is not laziness. It's not bitterness. It's not even weakness. It's conditioning. Somewhere along the way, you learned that expecting leads to pain. Maybe as a child, you waited for praise that rarely came. You hoped for warmth that was inconsistent. You reached for someone emotionally unavailable. Sometimes you got it, sometimes you didn't. That unpredictability shapes you in quiet ways. When love is inconsistent, you become careful. When promises are broken, you become self-contained. When your needs are dismissed, you stop voicing them. You don't decide this consciously. It happens in small moments. A parent who said later and forgot. A partner who said trust me and left. A friend who said I'm here but wasn't. Your system keeps score. And over time, it makes a quiet calculation. Expect less, feel less, lose less. You begin to tell yourself you're independent. You don't need much. You don't rely on anyone. But independence born from disappointment feels different. It feels heavy. You stop asking for reassurance. You stop initiating hard conversations. You stop planning too far ahead with anyone. If they stay, they stay. If they go, they go. You don't chase. You don't fight. You don't demand. You detach before you have to. It looks calm. It sounds calm. But underneath that calm is something tender. You didn't stop expecting because you don't care. You stopped calming because you cared too much. Because every time you hoped, it cost you something. There's a psychological term for this pattern. It's close to something called learned helplessness. When you try and try and try and nothing changes, the brain concludes that effort is pointless, so it conserves energy. But what's less talked about is emotional helplessness. When you open up and open up and open up and it doesn't lead to safety, your mind decides vulnerability is risky. So you close. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. You tell yourself, I don't expect anything from anyone. It sounds strong, but listen closely. That sentence carries a quiet grief, because human beings are wired to expect. We expect warmth. We expect reciprocity. We expect that if we show up, someone might show up too. To stop expecting is to override something natural, and overriding nature takes effort. That effort becomes your personality. You become the low-maintenance one, the one who says it's fine, the one who doesn't need much, the one who doesn't complain. They might even praise you for it. You're so chill. You're so independent. You're so easy to be around. They don't see what you're swallowing. They don't see the moment you typed and deleted, the moment you wanted to say that hurt, but didn't, the plans you secretly hoped they'd make with you, but you pretended not to care about. When you stop expecting, you also stop being surprised. Good things happen and you barely react. Compliments land and slide off. Love shows up and you question it. Because if you don't expect it, you don't fully receive it either. Your system is learned to dampen the highs to avoid the lows. It's efficient, but it's lonely. There's also something else happening. When you don't expect from others, you often over-rely on yourself. You become hyper-self-sufficient. You solve your own problems. You carry your own weight. And when someone offers help, you hesitate. Not because you don't want it, but because relying feels dangerous. If you expect someone to support you, and they don't, it hurts twice. Once for the lack, once for the hope you allowed. So you remove the second layer. No hope, no extra hurt. You convince yourself this is emotional maturity. And in some ways it is. You're not reactive, you're not dramatic, you're not chasing illusions. But there's a thin line between acceptance and resignation. Acceptance says, I see reality clearly. Resignation says, nothing will change, so why bother? Can you feel the difference? One is grounded, the other is tired. Sometimes when people stop expecting anything, they call it peace. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's exhaustion disguised as wisdom. There's an inner voice that whispers, "I won't be disappointed if I never hoped." And that voice sounds protective, because it is. This pattern likely began as survival. As a child, you may not have been able to change your environment. You couldn't make someone more affectionate. You couldn't make stability. So your nervous system did the next best thing. It adapted. It lowered the volume of desire. It softened your expectations. It made you self-reliant. Back then, that was intelligent. It kept you from constant heartbreak. It helped you function. It helped you move forward. But survival strategies don't always expire when the environment changes. You carry them into adulthood, into relationships, into work, into friendships. And now, the very shield that protected you also blocks connection, because intimacy requires expectation, not unrealistic fantasy, but basic expectation. If I share something vulnerable, I expect care. If I invest in you, I expect effort. If I love you, I expect reciprocity. When you don't allow yourself to expect these things, you accept less than you deserve, quietly, without confrontation. You tell yourself you're just being realistic, but sometimes realism is just fear that has become rational. There's a subtle sadness in people who stop expecting. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's the kind that shows up as indifference. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm used to it. You might even say these things with a small smile, because expecting feels childish now. Hope feels risky. Optimism feels naive. But here's the quiet truth. You were never wrong for expecting care. You were never too much for wanting consistency. You were never unrealistic for hoping someone would show up. The problem was never your expectations. It was where you placed them. And instead of adjusting the environment, you adjusted yourself. You shrank. You minimized. You numbed. And that numbing can spread. You stop expecting from others. Then you stop expecting from life. You stop dreaming big. You stop trying new things. You stop believing things could surprise you. You tell yourself you're content, but sometimes you're just bracing for disappointment that hasn't even happened yet. The inner conflict is painful, because part of you still longs, still hopes, still wants to be met, and another part immediately shuts it down. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't assume. Don't count on it. It's like having a small light inside you and a hand that keeps dimming it. The light isn't gone, it's just guarded, and that guard once saved you. That's important to remember. You didn't become this way because you were cold. You became this way because you were hurt, and your mind did what minds do. It adapted. There is nothing shameful about that. But awareness changes things. Not overnight, not dramatically, just gently. When you start noticing the moment you say, "I don't expect anything," you can pause. Not to force hope, not to pressure yourself into vulnerability, just to observe. Is this acceptance, or is this fear speaking? Is this wisdom, or is this old pain protecting itself? That question alone creates space. Space between you and the pattern. And in that space, something soft can return. Maybe you allow yourself to expect small things, a returned call, a kind response, basic respect, not because you're entitled, but because you're human. You don't have to swing from zero expectations to blind optimism. It's not about becoming naive again. It's about becoming selective. Expect from those who have shown consistency. Invest where there is reciprocity. Notice who meets you halfway. And if they don't, it doesn't mean you were wrong to expect. It means the connection wasn't aligned. There's a difference. When you stop expecting entirely, you remove the risk of disappointment, but you also remove the possibility of being pleasantly surprised, of being deeply seen, of being met in ways you didn't even know were possible. Staying guarded keeps you safe, but it also keeps you alone. And maybe the real shift isn't about expecting more from everyone. Maybe it's about expecting more from yourself. Not in performance, not in perfection, but in honesty. Honesty about what you want, about what you feel, about what you deserve. You're allowed to expect kindness. You're allowed to expect effort. You're allowed to expect emotional presence. And if someone consistently fails to meet those expectations, the answer isn't to erase them. It's to reevaluate.